Routing is the process by which a web application uses the current browser URL to determine what content to show to your user. It is essentially the way your user navigates through your website or web application. Every time your user enters a new URL into their browser address bar, manually or by clicking a link in your app, they are requesting some resource, and each component of the URL serves to specify which resource is desired. For example, a user visiting the Alter Class website could click on a link in the application's header, which changes the current browser URL to alterclass.io/blog and provides the user with a new page that contains all the blog posts from Alter Class. Now, if you'd like to filter those blog posts and only display the ones related to React.js, you could enter React.js into the search field, which will add a query string to the URL and render a new page with the results filtered. So, dividing and organizing your application into several pages keeps your app's content organized, helps your user navigate around more easily, and allows for an engaging and better user experience. Depending on the kind of application you are building, there are different ways to handle routing, either using server-side routing or client-side routing. With server-side routing, each URL change will result in requesting a new page from a server. The routing is handled on the server, and a whole new HTML document is served to the user with each request to the server. Therefore, a server-side request causes the whole page to refresh because a new GET request is sent to the server, which replies with a new document, completely discarding the old page altogether. This has several advantages, such as only requesting a page when needed. Plus, it generally has better SEO, because the compiled HTML returned by the server is easily crawlable by search engines. However, it has a few drawbacks. First, it always causes a full refresh of the entire page, which most of the time is not necessary. Indeed, some parts of the page are always the same, whatever the page requested by the user, like the header or the footer, for example. Or maybe just one small part of the page needs to be updated with new data. So this can make the application slower to render on each page change. The other way to handle routing in your application is by using client-side routing. This is the mechanism we will learn in this lesson as we are building our applications with React, which handles everything on the browser using JavaScript only. We call that kind of application single page application, or SPA for short, because only one HTML document is sent by the server to the browser and only once during the initial request to the server. This HTML document is initially a blank page that is being updated internally by the JavaScript loaded on the page. In our case, we're using React to do that. So we have only one HTML document in our application, but then all the routes or pages are handled by React on the client side. That's why we call that client-side routing. In other words, when a user clicks on a link in your application, the URL changes, but we don't send any new requests to the server. Instead, the change to the URL updates the state of your application, which results in re-rendering the UI of the application after fetching new data eventually, which feels like navigating from one page to another. It is important to note that the whole page won't refresh when using client-side routing. Instead, there are just some elements inside the application that will change. This makes routing between views much faster than with server-side routing because there is no extra back and forth between the browser and the server. Plus, we don't need to render a whole new HTML document after each request. However, as all the JavaScript should be loaded into the browser with the initial request, this is why the initial load time of a single page application takes longer. Also, we are probably loading parts of the application that the user will never request during its visit. Search engine crawling is also less optimized for this kind of application. And even if search engines like Google are making good progress on crawling single-page applications, this is still not as efficient as using server-side routing. Finally, client-side routing does not come by default with React. That's why we need a third-party library to enable routing and create the routes of our applications. So let's jump right into it in the next lesson.